Hi, my name is Jeanette Altz, and I am the Assistant Costume Shop Manager and a draper at Montclair State University in the Department of Theater and Dance. Today I'm going to begin a web series of instructional videos on the various types of hand sewing and machine sewing techniques that we use in theater and dance. Each video will demonstrate on a piece of plain fabric, and I'll also show some instances where we use it on a costume. Today we're starting with the running stitch, and I'll be using, for the first few stitches, we'll be using the hand sampler that we give to our beginning students in the costume shop. It starts with a piece of muslin that is cut approximately 12 to 14 inches long and probably about 10 inches wide. Each of the shorter ends are folded over twice and pressed. And on another day, you'll see why. We will also need a clear plastic ruler. The one I use is 18 inches long and 2 inches wide. It's a standard size for the clear plastic ruler, although they come in many different sizes. This is very useful. We'll also need a pencil. For this project, a plain number 2 pencil will work just fine. A pair of small scissors. You don't need anything big, all we're doing is cutting thread. Thread in a bright color. When you're learning a stitch, it's often helpful to use a brighter color thread, especially against something plain like muslin, so you can really see what you're doing. A sewing needle. I have a variety of sizes. Each of them have their own use. I'd suggest for new sewers to find a longer needle with a larger eye. And then what's helpful, not necessary, but very helpful, is some sort of product to smooth your thread while sewing. The traditional product is beeswax. There are a couple other products on the market, but the one I use is called Thread Magic. Instead of wax, it is a silicone base. These are used to smooth your thread and make your sewing easier. To begin, we need to draw a straight line in the center of the single layer of our fabric sampler, and I want that line to be exactly 1 inch away from this folded edge in the center. To do that, and this is a great opportunity to learn how your clear plastic ruler works, remember it's 2 inches wide, so this center line is 1 inch from each edge. And I can line up that center line with my folded edge. And I know that I am drawing a line that is exactly 1 inch away and parallel. Great. So now we want to thread our needle. You don't want to use too much thread. So to measure it, I use my forearm and pull my thread out twice the length from my hand to my forearm. Thread the eye, right? And this is where I use my thread magic, and we pull the thread through the thread magic, and it gives a nice little layer of protection. Now there's lots of ways to tie a knot at the end of your thread. For a running stitch, we generally only use a single thread. We do not double our thread. So we're gonna tie a knot in only one end of the thread. My favorite technique to tie a knot is putting the thread on my fingertip of my pointing finger, holding it down with the tip of my sewing needle. Right? And then I take my left hand, your left-handed, you can do the opposite, and then I wrap the thread around the tip of the needle 3 times. I'm going to hold it down with my thumb now. I'm going to pull my thread through. And then I get a nice tight little knot in the end of my thread. We love that. Now, I'm going to rotate this fabric towards me. So now it is facing away from me. And I'm going to keep my fabric on the table while I'm sewing. It is very tempting to do bad techniques right now because it's easy with a running stitch. But if you're learning how to sew for the first time, this is a great opportunity to learn how to do things correctly. And often what we have to do, because you can't see the other side, is we have to do 2 steps in one. And so what helps, and one of the reasons we keep it on the table, is that so we don't bunch up our work. You put the tip of the needle in on the line, and you kind of are going to feel, and then pull up so that it comes up on the line, right? So that's one step. And a running stitch, you just repeat that over and over again, right? And we're going to try to keep it even, approximately 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to go in and out. Go in and out. I'm going to travel the length of this fabric. And you'll notice one of the advantages of keeping it on the table is that I'm not bunching it up. So if I'm holding it, I might want to go like this. And now you can see that it's no longer on the line. I might pull too tight, it might not be even. So you keep it on the table, and then you use the table to guide your needle. And get used to the feel of traveling down the line. Go all the way to the end, however long it takes you. And my students always are, oh my gosh, you did that so fast. And I'm like, yeah, well, I've been sewing for a really long time. How long you been doing this? Oh, today? Then give yourself a break. You'll get it. It's muscle memory and a skill just like anything else. Some people it comes easier than others, but anyone can learn to sew. All right, now I've gotten to the end. And so not always with a running stitch, but we're going to do this for the sampler. We tie off. So when you tie off, whenever you tie off, you want to make that knot as close to the last stitch as possible. I don't want to tie off someplace over here, right? If my thread came out here, I want to make a knot right here. So to do that, I'm going to make a teeny tiny stitch, but I'm not going to pull it all the way through. I'm going to leave a loop, right? I'm going to take that loop, hold it, and I'm going to put my needle through it 2 times. Once, twice. I'm going to keep on pulling it. So now, that creates a little knot at the end. And I can cut my thread off. So one instance where we might use a running stitch in costumes is when we are flat lining a garment. You'll see here I have a pattern piece cut out. It has our fashion fabric, which is a silk. That's what you're going to see. And then we've got it lined, and we call this flat lining in the theater, with a lightweight, this is a cotton batiste. and it gives a little more body and strength to the fabric. And often we will line by machine, but when doing delicate costume work, it's often better to flatline by hand. In this instant, I am going to knot my thread because it's going to be permanent. I'm going to start. There's various techniques to do this. I'm going to, because you'll see we have lines on, this is our stitching lines for the garment. There's various techniques. I'm going to start at the end here. Right? So when flatlining, various people do it differently. I like to move in about 1/8 of an inch away. So it's not very much. You can measure it if you want, but as long as you can eyeball it, so 1/8 of an inch is about there. See, look, I'm really good at eyeballing that. Away from the line. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before, where I'm going to try my best to not lift up the fabric. I'm going to do a running stitch. Do a gentle running stitch. And my running stitch is going to be a little bit smaller instead of 1/4 of an inch. We're more in the 1/8 inch range. Gently on the outside of the stitching lines. Sometimes I do pick up my fabric. Shh, don't tell. I find sometimes I need to. But we want to be careful not to pull. Right? This is an instance where we definitely don't want to pull. And I've got thread here. Before we were doing in a contrasting thread, but this is a thread that's going to disappear and it's going to match our fashion fabric. So I can see it. It's harder to see because it's not bright purple, but it matches our fashion fabric. So we always want to use thread that matches our fabric as best as we can. Right. Another instance where I might want to use a running stitch is when I'm thread marking. And here's in a case where what I want to do is I want to be able to see this line on the outside of my fashion fabric, but I don't want a permanent line. So I'm going to use thread, and I'm going to use thread that eventually I want to pull out. So in this case, I'm not going to knot the end of my thread. And I'm going to sew on the line instead of to the outside of it like I did with my flat lining. And we can use a larger stitch, so we can go back up to that 1/4 inch. Right. So that I can see this line. I'm still using a thread that matches my fashion fabric in case for some reason I do not pull out this thread and it goes on stage. No one's going to see it. Sometimes we do want to use a contrasting thread. So there's lots of tailoring techniques that include very specific thread marking that you use. And in those cases, we almost always use white thread. And those threads are definitely taken out beforehand. But in this case, I'm just transferring a mark that I've drawn on the inside of my garment to the outside. And in that case, I'm going to use a thread that matches so I can see it, but I don't have to worry about it being seen by the audience. All right? As you can see, you can faintly make out that line, right? So I can fold this back and press it when I need it to be so that I get a nice clear line and I don't have to make some guesses.